Welcome to the third act. My name is Margot Spence, and I'm an in-house lawyer looking to plan my retirement years, or as I think of it, my third act. Everybody looks forward to retirement, a time to do what you want, when you want, a time to travel, pursue hobbies, and enjoy the fruits of your labor. But how do you find meaning in your day-to-day existence? How do you find your purpose and your people? For many professionals, especially lawyers, this can be a daunting transition. After 8 years of training and then many more years refining their craft, lawyers must transition from 40 years of 50-hour work weeks to something. This is especially a challenge for in-house legal counsel who are accustomed to being in the center of big decisions, spending their time analyzing and solving problems, collaborating with others, and engaging with their clients. How does that lifestyle translate to a satisfying retirement? One that provides physical and emotional well-being, intellectual stimulation, collaboration, and meaning? This is the question we will explore on this limited series podcast. On this episode of The Third Act, we will be chatting with Linda Robison. Linda holds the unique position of having had two careers in law. Firstly, as General Counsel and Vice President of Human Resources for the Insurance Corporation of British Columbia, known here in BC as ICBC, and then as a professionally trained career coach to lawyers. Linda has been retired for about 10 years and appears to have made that transition quite seamlessly. Linda, welcome, and thank you for agreeing to be on this podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's such a great topic.
And very timely with whomever I'm talking to. They seem to all be interested. So let's start by you telling us a bit about your career as General Counsel at ICBC. What was your path to get to this position, and what did you enjoy the most?
Yeah, I graduated in way back in 1978. So I was part of that first wave of women entering the profession. My class at law school was about 20% female. I think maybe the year after me it was 25%. But when I was called, which was in 1980, I clerked and then I articled. There was only two women judges in the entire province of BC, and there must have been some female partners, but I never bumped into one for years and years and years. So I ended up working for ICBC as after I had finished my articles, and I loved it right from the beginning. It was a great environment. It was really great colleagues. After a couple of years, I was getting a little bored and restless because I felt that I wasn't learning enough there. I wasn't advancing. So I went and I lived in England for 2 years. I did a LLM at LSE, and then I stayed on for another year in London in corporate finance, working for the Canadian company, which was then called Wood Gundy. I came back to BC at the height of the recession in the early 80s, and very hard to find jobs, but ICBC offered me my old job back, which I took reluctantly because I felt it was a step backwards. But I'm really glad I took it because I moved into management fairly quickly after that. I eventually became, well, within a few years, general counsel and did that for, at least 10 years. And then I also became the senior vice president of human resources and law. And I was corporate secretary on and off over the years. And I loved working in house. I liked it because you're part of a corporate team. Everyone works for the same client. And I liked being on teams with someone from finance and someone from underwriting and somebody from marketing and being the lawyer on the team giving the advice. And we all knew the client really well. So I loved that corporate environment and I loved also being in management. So I was on the corporate side, not the litigation side, which is the personal injury side. But we also worked with outside counsel on all the corporate litigation, which was always very interesting because we often were doing, like we had the very first privacy case, and we would receive the first writ on things like that. So lots of new law. So it was a very congenial environment for me to practice law in. And the work was varied. I liked that about it. It was always something new every day, a different type of work. And I really enjoyed my time there. It was a great place to work. They were very good to me.
So how did you arrive at the decision that it was time to leave and change?
Well, I, like a lot of women, especially women lawyers, I had my children late. I got married when I was 37, and I had my two sons at 38 and 40. And I was also had a lot of big career advancements in my 40s. And by the end of my 40s, I was exhausted. I was exhausted from having small children, working 60-hour weeks, just, round the clock. I used to feel that my house was just a hotel I came to sleep at. And I thought, this isn't any way to have a life. I loved law. I still loved working there, but I knew I needed a big change. And I looked at working for different companies, but I thought I would just be jumping into more of the same. So I thought, and also I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do next because I was too busy. Like I was working all the time, so I couldn't investigate other options. So I decided the only way to solve this problem was to just quit cold turkey, which was very, very terrifying. I was 49. I was not heading into retirement. I figured I was working for at least another 15 years. We still had a mortgage. I had young children. And I was lucky in that an opportunity came along where the company had to downsize substantially and they were offering retirement packages. Well, they were retirement, they were wanting you to leave. That's were aimed at the union, but I asked if I could have one of the packages, even though I was a VP. And they said yes, but they tried to talk me into staying. And I said, this is, I just need this opportunity. So I was very, very lucky in that I was on salary for another year. And it gave me a year to figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life.
So you bought yourself some time, basically.
Yes, I did. It was great. It was a blessing. Oh,
So how is it that you decided that you needed another career, one that was probably in law, but coaching might be the avenue to pursue? How did that come
yeah,
about?
that actually wasn't on my list of possibilities when I left. In fact, I had nothing on my list of possibilities when I left. Where I had been fortunate was I had worked with a corporate coach that the company had hired for me when I took over the VP HR role, because it was such a new type of executive role. I would really benefit by a coach who'd worked with other VP HRs. And so I had seen what that was like, and it had been a very positive and helpful experience for me. And so I thought, boy, you know what? I could probably do that with lawyers, what she did for me in the corporate setting. But at that time, there was only one other lawyer coach in Vancouver, and she was starting out at the same time I was, but her focus was marketing because she'd worked at doing marketing advice. And that made sense to law firms to hire a marketing coach to help people, build their client base. I had never had to market myself because I'd always worked in-house. So I knew marketing couldn't be my focus. It would have to be something else. So I took a weekend course down in Seattle with the Hudson Institute of Coaching, which is based in Santa Barbara, which was where my corporate coach had trained. And it was a weekend, and you can get these weekends, they're offered under all kinds of organizations which help people in transition. It might not be retirement transition, it might be career transition or other transitions. It can even be relationship transitions that help you figure out what your next steps are. So I took this weekend course and it was transformational. By the end of that weekend, I thought I could be a coach. And the weekend was not about coaching, it was just about transitions.
Um,
And so, very quickly, almost too quickly, within a couple of months, I signed up for the coaching training in Santa Barbara, and I spent the next year both doing it remotely and going down for 3 weekends. And I felt like I had found my home. This was the combination of everything I had loved about being a lawyer, mentoring the lawyers in my department. I'd always loved teaching. I loved all aspects of it. So after that year of training, I slowly started to build my practice. It took a long time because no one knew about coaching for lawyers, and I was constantly having to explain to people, why would we hire you again?
Well, this was about what, 2000? The year 2000 when this
2002.
Yeah, because I think it was quite a novel thing for anybody to have a coach, really, far less be guided on transitions and what you're doing or how you conduct yourself and whether your career is going the path it needs to go for you. So I think you hit on something that was in its early days and was very fortunate, I think, that you've been able to do this.
Yeah, I was very lucky, but I was very scared leaving my corporate job. Like, I really understand people who are retired leaving the corporate world. I'd worked there for 20 years with a little break in between. And I had long-standing friendships there, going back 2 decades. I'd become quite close, and not just the legal department, but people all throughout the corporation. I had a steady paycheck. I had a pension. The number of people who came up to me and said, "What? You're retiring before 60, but what about the pension?" And I thought, I'm not planning my whole life around the pension. Benefits, all those things. Now, I was very lucky. My husband had a pension and benefits, so I realized I had that enormous help, that we had that security. And he also was working, although he earned less than I did.
Mhm.
But I was so scared about, well, I figure out what my next step is. How will I know what to do with the rest of my life to find a job? Who will I hang out with? What will I be? I knew I wanted to stay in law, but I wasn't certain, but I knew I didn't want to practice law anymore. And I didn't want to be a VP of anything anymore. I'd kind of been there, done that. I'd liked it, but that phase was over.
Exactly. So no going back. So as you proceeded on this new career path, what were the challenges that you faced?
Well, they're kind of the obvious ones. They're similar to the challenges of anyone who leaves a law firm and decides to set up as a sole practitioner. Suddenly, there weren't 600 people in an IT department who would come rushing to my aid every time something went wrong on my computer. That was a huge learning curve. I didn't know how to market myself because I hadn't had to do that in-house.
Mhm.
The whole marketing thing was new to me. I actually hired a coach to help me with the marketing. That was a very wise move. I had to figure out my niche. And the other big challenge for me was working alone. I'm quite an extrovert, and I really drew on the energy of the people in the office around me, especially I had a very congenial corporate legal department, and so we had fun at work, and suddenly I'm kind of now trying to run this practice out of my home because the coaching was all done over the telephone. So initially, that was by far the biggest challenge, let alone explaining a brand new profession to nobody that thought they should hire me. But I was very lucky because right at the time I set out on this endeavor with the training in 2002, the Women Lawyers Forum at the CBA was being formed. And in one of those fortuitous things that happens in life, I bumped into someone who was looking for someone to help start Deborah Van Ginkel with a new mentoring program. So I teamed up with her and we designed the mentoring program and I did the training for years. And that was where I ended up finding my community. It was with the CBA. And I was very active in the Women Lawyers Forum on the executive for 12, 14 years. I chaired the provincial section. I went on to chair the national section. And it gave me a network and it got me in front of a lot of lawyers. I did a lot of pro bono free training sessions, of course. And then law firms started hiring me to design mentoring programs, parental leave programs, to coach some of the women that were really struggling and they were worried about losing, help lawyers on their career paths. So my niche became not exclusively, but primarily working with women lawyers to help them stay in the law
Mhm.
and not leave private practice.
Is it fair to say then that as one makes a transition in life, one needs to adjust their community or find the right community to that new transitional piece?
Well, I think it's essential. I think, I mean, the two things we're all afraid of in retirement, leaving aside finances and health, which are sort of a different discussion,
Mhm.
um, it's what am I going to do when I wake up Monday morning? I got this blank day. And who am I going to hang out with? Because it may not be your spouse or partner, and yes, you might have a few golf buddies you golf with once a week, but they aren't going to fill your time. It's so interesting, this era in history that we are at. It's the first time in history that mankind has had 20 to 25 years of very healthy living, where at least for those of us in the West, this is not true of the rest of the world who often have to work to survive until they die, where we have this period of retirement years that simply didn't exist anymore anywhere, nowhere else in history. It's like the 20th century also invented the age of adolescence. Adolescence didn't exist before because girls got married at 14 and 15, really right out of childhood, And even my father had to stop school rather when he was 14 during the Depression to go out of work. So they kind of went from childhood right into adulthood. And then we now have this adolescent period of from 13 to 19 where you get to prepare for adulthood that we didn't have. Well, now we have these 25 years that just have never existed before, where people could live healthy, long lives and be productive until they're 90. So it's been a challenge of really just the last, I don't know, 30 years or something, this new era.
But what I've seen also is that the culture that we live in has not changed. So there is this sort of subliminal or subconscious thought that retirement means stop,
Yeah.
when it actually is
Oh
not.
no.
And then faced with this stop, well, then we all get, no, I'm not stopping. What do you mean?
Yeah. And we shouldn't stop. We
No.
don't want to stop. And it's interesting because when I did my coaching training, the man who began the Hudson Institute had done a huge amount of research on exactly this retirement period. He was a psychologist and he had written the very early books back in the 80s and 90s on this. And he refused to use in our training the word retirement. He called it pro-tirement,
Okay.
which it's a made-up word. But he wanted to talk about we're moving forward, we're not going back. Because the word retirement, which is, as you know, from the French word retirer,
Mhm.
means to withdraw. And when I looked it up, because I was wondering what that word came from, it actually said its original meaning was used in French, in the military, when the army used to withdraw to a safe place
Mhm.
to regroup. And then the word adopted a broader meaning of just withdrawing generally. Well, we are not withdrawing at when we retire. We're not withdrawing from life. We're not going to lie down somewhere and just wait to die. We have too much energy and too many things we want to do. It's a really exciting time to live that we've got these years given to us where we can be so productive.
I'm thinking about some interviews of Clint Eastwood of late, where he's still making movies, and I think he's in his 90s or close to 90. And someone said, "You're still doing this?" He says, "Yeah, you don't let the old man in." So it's like if you keep doing something that's productive and enjoyable, whatever, then you're basically enjoying life and not just waiting for it to end. And
Right. And that's what keeps us alive. And that's what keeps us healthy. You have to have a reason to get up every morning, not just a reason, but something you're excited about looking forward to, not just that day, but into the future. My experience amongst my friends is that my female friends have adjusted to retirement more easily than my male friends have. And primarily that's because if they happen to have grandchildren or family at that time, they throw themselves into that right away. I don't have grandchildren yet. And women tend to have a lot of friendships outside the workplace. So they often have whole networks of friends immediately to hang out with. But men often only have their golf buddies or their pickleball buddies. And so they are looking for community. Now, women, I think, when they retire, want more than just the grandchildren and those pockets of friends. I think both male and female lawyers are looking for whole new purpose in life.
yeah, exactly. I guess what I struggle with is you can have connections that are friends and you can do things that are friendly and social, but you don't necessarily get that intellectual repartee that you get at the office.
Yep. Yep.
That depth, that sort of analytical kind of critical thinking focused conversation doesn't
Yes.
happen usually in a social setting.
I agree. And just socializing with friends endlessly at coffee and lunch is also not going to be a reason for living. There's way more to life than doing that. That's fun. A person is lucky if they have that
Mhm.
friendships already. But I've made huge numbers of new friends in retirement, especially an 88-year-old very good friend of mine who's passed on right now constantly would say to me, I can't believe I'm 88. She says, I feel like I'm about 40. She used to say to me, this is years ago. She said, "Now the key to getting old is always make younger friends, because friends of your own age group start to die."
It's true.
So I
It's
have
true.
been consciously making younger friends in their 20s. It's wonderful because they're full of energy and they're so interesting and they introduce me to so many different topics. But I mean, to make these younger people real friends, not just acquaintances. Like we have dinner together and I talk to them about whatever they want to talk about. I'm lucky that my sons are 31 and 34, so it does sort of connect me to that generation. Like they talk about things that, they talk, one of them was at the Taylor Swift concert and their fiance was in Toronto, and I get to hear all about that. So I feel connected. That's a connection that I value that helps me.
Oh, and the other thing is to get involved in a community where it really is populated more with younger people.
Yeah.
I know where I
Yeah.
work in my position now, the average age is 38 and younger. So, it's great to sit down at the coffee table or the lunch table and just have a chat about where they are, what they're doing, where they're going, and I'm always surprised that they want to talk to me. So, it's a nice relationship for sure.
They want to talk to you if you are interested in them. It's kind of the same for anybody in life.
That's true.
If they think you're an older person that wants to just hand out wisdom and pontificate and think you're smarter than they are, you're boring. But if you're really interested in what in their careers, where they're traveling, what their relationships are about, they're thrilled to have someone to talk to. So yeah, it's about them.
That's true. So you had this fabulous coaching career, lasted almost 12 years. How did you decide time to change again?
Well, it was very different this time around because when I left practicing law, I was 49, and when I retired, I was 63, which was 9 years ago. I'm 72. So I was at an age where I was now actually ready for real retirement. The other one was more a transition to job change or career change. And I still loved what I was doing. I really loved it. But I also felt that I'd kind of ticked all the boxes. I'd done all the things in that career and the previous career that I'd set out to do. And there wasn't sort of any more accomplishments I wanted personally. And I had a huge to-do list of things I wanted to do with the rest of my life that, you don't have time for when you're building a practice and wondering where the next client is coming from and sending out your invoices and, the usual things you do. So I was very lucky in that because I was self-employed. I downsized my practice to just a tiny handful of clients in the last year, which allowed me to ease into retirement much more easily than abruptly stopping one day. And I was also chairing and planning a big conference that year, so I just threw myself into that. So it was a very different time, but still, I was excited and looking forward to it. But I was still wondering, all these things I want to do, will I do them? Like, will I get around to doing them? Will I just sink into a stupor? Will I just, I didn't. In fact, of course, once my coaching practice was truly closed and I had no more responsibilities, I had this surge of energy and excitement that I could now do whatever I want. But that's really scary. This, I could do whatever I want. And the reason it's scary, I was thinking about this today, is when you're a lawyer or any professional, a doctor, an accountant in the corporate world, it's not just lawyers, our entire life is mapped out for us. You get into university, you get into law school, then you article, then you get your first job. Maybe you aren't kept on at the firm, so you have to go and you have to find another job. Maybe you're in a firm where you have to climb the ladder to become a partner. Maybe you try that and you become self-employed and you build up a practice, but you know what the next step is. Okay, if I leave this firm, I want to try out this. And then you have to build the clientele. You have to take certain courses and gain expertise in an area. Like our life is mapped for us. We don't have to think about the next goal and we don't have to think about the next step. But when you retire, suddenly the game plan is yanked away from us. That career plan that followed step by step, it's blank. It's a complete blank piece of paper that we get to write on however we want. And it's scary.
For sure, very daunting. So you decided that it was time to transition, you were going to retire. What was your first step? I mean, you started your, transitioning out of your business. So it does give you some time. But did
Yeah.
you do any work or about it, or did you just wake up in the morning one day and say, I'm going to do this? Or
No, I had been thinking about it.
Okay.
And I would highly recommend anyone who's thinking about retiring talking to other lawyers about the transition.
Mhm.
I've known a number of lawyers who were just so burned out when they retired. They were just exhausted from the long hours, and they said to me, "I'm not doing anything the first year. I am just playing golf and relaxing. I'm not going to worry about." I just and that's completely legitimate, completely legitimate. That if you just want a year of actually lying fallow um, and doing very little. That's good for your health, your mental health, your physical health. I didn't need a year of lying fallow. That year I'd had of transition was my fallow year. I was actually all fired up and ready to, charge out. I think for in-house counsel, it's a bit harder to have that transition year, though I've had a couple of friends who have been retiring around 65, and they've gone to their company and said, "I'd like to work, half-time next year." And they've been given a project to do. And they've just had that project, and that has actually helped them quite a bit. But that's not always possible to set up. But it was good because it was their idea. They went and approached the company and said, I'd like to retire in a year, and I'd like, is there a project? And the company didn't come to them. They were proactive at seeking that out and seeing if they could set it up. So if that works, I think it's tremendous. It really gives you a year of easing into retirement. But when you're faced with, I mean, I started off on my little checklist of things I knew I'd always wanted to do. The first on my list was what else? Play golf. I had never played golf before. I was going to learn. My husband had always played golf. I thought it was something we could do together. So I promptly signed up for golf lessons. He was utterly uninterested in playing golf with me because he had his own buddies to play golf with in his senior men's club. And I was, of course, really bad because you can't start sports in your 60s and hope to be good. So I had to, fortunately, I joined a women's league at a public golf course too. We don't even belong to private courses. And I made a whole new set of friends. It was great. And I ended up liking it. I'm terrible at it, of course, at this age, but it gave me a whole other interest that I'd wanted to pursue. I actually liked it. During the COVID lockdown, I took piano lessons. I'd always sworn I'd go back. Stopped piano when I was 13. I'd go back and I had them online, and it was great fun. But when COVID ended, oh, I had enough. Remembered that's why I really hated practicing back when I was 12. But I'm glad I did this for a year and a half. It was great COVID activity to, play the piano. So I tried quite a few things that were fun, and I'm glad I did them, but they weren't enough. Like just learning to play golf and playing it once a week, or just having a piano lesson once a week, that's not enough intellectually, and more importantly, it's not engaging. It's not big enough. They're little individual activities.
Mhm.
I needed something bigger, more engaging, I needed a purpose in life is what I needed. That wasn't practicing law.
Thank you for listening to part one of my interview with Linda Robertson. I've enjoyed hearing Linda's perspective on what retirement is today, and in particular, what this natural progression in life can look like for in-house legal counsel. Do join me for part two of my interview with Linda Robertson as we discuss how to plan and create our third act. Thank you for listening to The Third Act. The creation of this podcast has been made possible with the support of the Canadian Corporate Counsel Association, who has provided the platform to publish this podcast from the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations, whose historical relationship with the land continues to this day. I also want to acknowledge the support of Dr. Wilson Kwong of the Inspired Dental Group. The Inspired Dental Group is located at Oak Ridge Centre and downtown Vancouver, both located in British Columbia. Dr. Wilson Kwong is an accomplished, forward-thinking, and patient-centric dentist with 35 years of practical experience. Motivated by the principles of trust, integrity, customer service, and clinical prowess, Dr. Wilson Kwong created the Inspired Dental Group 15 years ago to serve the community of Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. This podcast would not be possible without the technical skills of Alex Worden of Webcast Guru, and of course the generosity of the lawyers from across Canada who agreed to be interviewed. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this limited series podcast, or in retirement in general. Please join me for the next episode of this series. Until then, I wish you happy planning for your third act.